Let's try again. My name's Brad Grossman, for those of you who are new, and I'm here to be your Zeit Guide, as I've been since mid-March. Zeit Guide is the name of my company as well, and what we do is guide you through the zeitgeist. And if you don't know what zeitgeist means and you just think of it as like a big buzzword, it is a word from Germany, a German word, just getting a little bit more set up here too, that means spirit of the times. Spirit of the times. Geist, spirit, Zeit, time. So I am so excited that you are all here because I'm back. As you know, I did culture classes for free, which I do for my clients from mid-March, right after stay-at-home orders, to mid-August, and now I'm here again for this like one-off special class. And if you want to stay with me, I do these for clients, for organizations who want to stay up to speed and inspired to reinvent the future, because my God, we have to reinvent the future. It's like horrible now. But I'm here to inspire you. And I also have a premium class where anybody could join. And I do these small workshops on a weekly basis. So I hope those of you who have been loving culture class, you can join me in the future after this class. But we're just going to get started today because we're going to have an amazing class. It's going to teach us so much. We're going to first learn from Princess Lockerooo. And she was just in the New York Times, literally, last week. So how zeitgeisty is that? And she is the premier expert and performer of the art form whacking, which was born in the 1970s during the show Soul Train. And the reason why it's so culturally significant today is because on TikTok, which I've taught you so much about TikTok, and obviously it's still part of the major zeitgeisty conversation, it's been proselytized, not just by Samara, but thousands and thousands of people. And it started in the 70s, and it was created by the Black community. A lot of them were gay, and there are theories, but Samara's gonna, basically tell me if I'm correct or wrong, fizzled out when many of those dancers died during the AIDS epidemic. And I find it relevant for two reasons. One, we are in the middle of a pandemic and what's going to happen for our culture moving forward. And two, it was the first time that Black people were represented positively with freedom and energy and love to a mass audience on television. Before, they were represented as like thugs and robbers and criminals and, not a positive representation. So Samara, we're going to get to you. We're going to learn from you. You are a zeitgeisty kind of person, and I'm feeling like we got you right when you're budding. So think of this as a test run before you get all over the talk shows. So, and then we're going to have Michael Garner, who's the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer of the MTA. So if you're in New York and you ride the subway, or you ride the bus, or you take the train, and there are other things that we're going to learn from Michael, then we're going to learn how to do it safely today. And if you're not from New York, whatever he's doing amazingly. And hopefully you can learn from him to adopt what he's doing while you're in the other areas of the world. So what happens before all that? I do a little zeit guiding. So this is the stuff I'm thinking about today. So I'm going to share my screen. And we don't want to see my email. But we want to see this. This is my first screen, always. And it tells you how I granulate and think about and curate and compartmentalize all the things I feel that we need to know in terms of a synthesis. And my job is to help you because there's so much information out there. There's so much misinformation out there. Many of you don't have any time to figure out what's going on. And this is my job. People have called me the cultural DJ, which I think is funny and people love it. Probably not the the straight-laced executive audience, because I don't know if that could sell me into their organizations. But those of you who are creative, that's what I do, because just like a DJ goes through records, going through websites. So you're a cultural DJ. And when I'm looking at the world of ideas, I bucketize them in four big pillars of change. So we got global trends and societal issues. I talk about emerging tech and how it's impacting business and society, consumer trends, how they're constantly evolving, and where work is going. And when I'm talking about these things, I just don't want you to say, oh, okay, let's take notes. This is interesting. My job isn't just to do that. I'm not another news source for you. My job is to provoke your thinking and say to yourself, what did I learn? Why is it relevant to me? What can and what should I do about these learnings? And then ask yourself, how can you integrate these trends into your own business practices, strategies, decision-making, and life? And so when you leave culture class, go back to your teams and say, wow, we need to do this. If you do that, then I am successful, and I'll make myself really, and you'll make me really, really happy. So as you know, those of you who have been with me in the beginning, I always have, and I'm going to just scroll through these, a weekly theme of what I'm thinking about. And unfortunately, this is like a never-ending story. So July, August 12th, September. I hope you're not having any flashbacks, nightmares. But today is September 24th. And I'm going to go through some of these things very quickly because we can't wait to hear from our zeitgeist. So theme number one. I've been talking about COVID since March 18th as a 3-act movie. So those of you who don't know how movies work, because you're not a cinephile, nerd, crazy person who's so devastated that nobody watches movies but just watches binge-watching television shows, because movies are great. Why wouldn't you watch a movie? I mean, it's 2 hours and then you're done. Now I have to spend, I don't know, a whole month watching a TV show. So an Act 3 movie. It starts with Act 1. Act 1 was March to May. March, April, May. And that's when we were introduced to our characters. In this case, the villain was COVID. Act 2 was the next 3 months. It was the summer. And that in a movie basically is when the plot rises. And usually a good movie has like so many different textures to it and so many different storylines. And as we know, the end of May, there was a dagger thrown into the story of us trying to get over COVID and survive with a happy ending. And we had George Floyd's death. We had other things, wildfires, earthquakes, so many things that are just unfathomable. And this is, I'm thinking, the third act. Hopefully we'll have a happy ending. Hopefully we'll get that, I'm not going to say any, maybe I could, that fucker out of office. And all the stuff that we have been so devastated by will hopefully turn into a happy ending. We'll get a vaccine, all that stuff. But there is a chance, as we know, of having a sequel. And in this case, the sequel would be another outbreak or a second wave. So that's theme number one. I just talked about all the shit that's plaguing our world right now. And a friend of mine named Jesse Kernan of the firm We Are Rosie compared it to the 10 plagues of Passover. For those of you who aren't Jewish and celebrate Passover, Passover is the holiday that celebrates the freedom of the Jews from Egypt. And when the Pharaoh wouldn't let Moses's people go, God, through Moses, created all these plagues to really scare them. And, there were boils and locusts, which, by the way, India is having a horrible problem right now with locusts. And it ended with the death of the firstborn. So it's making her feel like this. And, that's the thing. Having these scary feelings should basically tell us that something is happening in the world where there's a higher power, and I believe in a higher power. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual, is telling us something. We're doing something wrong, and we have to change. We have to reboot humanity. The next theme I'm thinking about is comparing Russia, China, and Iran to the Axis powers, or from their point of view, probably the Allied powers. If you were a studier of World War II, which I think many of us were, the Axis powers were the villains: Germany, Japan, and fascist Italy. And the Allied powers were the US, Great Britain, France, and Russia, and China, actually. I don't even know if you know that, but now, which is where we are right now in the middle of the General Assembly for the UN, we are seeing all this, and I'm going to rush through. Russia, China, and Iran hackers are targeting Trump and Biden. This is what Microsoft says. We know China, Russia, and Iran are sending spies to steal coronavirus vaccine research. Just yesterday, because of the General Assembly, China's Xi, Russia's Putin are pushing back at Trump during virtual gathering of the UN General Assembly. And we've been covering TikTok, and the saga continues. Trump wants to ban it. He demanded that ByteDance, which is a Chinese company, which actually has a lot of American investors, sell to an American company. And Oracle with Walmart are going to invest, and hopefully that'll make Trump basically enable this continuation of TikTok. But if it doesn't go through, people are going to be devastated. The Gen Zs are going to be devastated. And basically, this is from the China Daily, which is a newspaper there, or a digital paper and digital newspaper there. And they're basically had this political cartoon, just to give you perspective of the other side, saying that decoupling from China is a pipe dream. Trump wants to decouple ourselves from China. And by the way, I'm giving you an American perspective. So if you're not from America, obviously, I'm sure you're seeing this in your own point of view, which is a good time. I love doing this. Everybody put in chat where you're from. I love seeing where everybody's from. Second big theme I'm thinking about is that misinformation is a huge problem. It's going to be a problem in the election. It's scary, but I'm going to show you the dark side, and I'm going to show you the light side. The dark side is that, as the World Health Organization said, is even worse than the pandemic, is what they're calling the infodemic. And if you haven't heard of QAnon, and by the way, only 3% supposedly of Americans know what QAnon is, but that's rising in power. And there's a conspiracy theory, basically, where they believe, and if you don't know, this is crazy, that they are an internet conspiracy theory whose followers believe that a cabal of Satan-worshiping Democrats, Hollywood celebrities, and billionaires are running the world while engaging in pedophilia, human trafficking, and the harvesting of supposedly life-extending chemicals from the blood of abused children. So they're proselytizing this theory and recruiting people. In fact, there are 2 representatives who might come into office who are QAnon supporters. So this is crazy. And then on the other side, though, is that Gen Zs are eroding the power of misinformation, which is actually kind of cool. 69% of Gen Z students said it's somewhat or very easy for them to distinguish real news from misinformation, and half said that they think it is very difficult for older generations. So if you think that your kids are just spending all their time on TikTok doing stupid dances and memes, they're actually gaming the system to make sure that the world becomes a better place. I'm sure many of you already know that the Gen Z's impact of how we're moving forward in terms of this election is that they got all these Gen Zs on TikTok to sign up for the Trump rally, and they thought millions of people were going to be there, and actually, I don't know, 4 people showed up. I'm just exaggerating, but they're awesome. They were instrumental in getting people to support Black Lives Matters. They basically they told everybody to create a campaign to arrest the killers of Breonna Taylor. Unfortunately, they weren't completely successful. They know how to use TikTok to get people to sign up on Making America Great website and take away basically buy stuff, put it in the cart, and then not buy it. Where all these Make America Great people have to spend all this money to say, oh, your cart is full, and why don't you buy it? So they have been doing a lot of things in terms of the misinformation as well. And I got to say, Gen Z is our hope. They are the best equipped generation of the future. They are struggling right now, but this is going to create such resilience. Even those who are in college right now and aren't happy how things are going are not allowed to live in college, but they are living what these authors or these officers are calling, or these journalists are calling off campus housing. So they're living together and trying to support each other and prevent themselves from getting the novel coronavirus. This was a piece that was just sent out on Spotify advertising. And they are basically showing how the generation after their research is going to be known for creation. And 62% of Gen Z said their generation is ready to rebuild society from the ground up. And they plan to be, or already are, their own bosses. I don't really have time to show this, but even in the China Daily, actually, you know what? I'll just show a couple things. We want to keep learning. They showed at UN at 75, which is the General Assembly, the youth's global view of where society is going and what they want. Not surprisingly, they don't have any Americans here, but they did profile people from around the world.
The biggest challenge the United Nations is facing now is climate change and its effects.
The world is experiencing a threat towards multilateralism.
COVID, the lack of understanding among different cultures, and the inequality women are facing.
Climate change and inequalities must be the two biggest challenges that the UN is facing today.
There's more to that, but I kind of thought it was interesting that that was from the China Daily, and you see Gen Zs from all over the world, or the youth and millennials, really having the urge and the desire and the power to actually change the world to make it a positive place. I've been talking about the new domesticity back in the 18th century, when domesticity was formed, when the man went to work in the city and the woman was the head of the household. But now we're seeing a conflation of the public space and private space. You are all working, we're in our homes, we're also having our private lives. And one of the things that is scary about it is that in terms of the movement of diversity and equality of women in society, women are spending an average of 15 more hours on domestic labor than men. And pre-pandemic, it was 35 versus 25. So this new domesticity is something to think about. And I'm going to end with some positivity. We are about to embark on a business and cultural renaissance. I know things are going to get better. I promise you. The Business Roundtable that's headed by Jamie Dimon just came out with this CEO economic outlook. And right here, which is the economic outlook, we are slowly rising, and hopefully it'll rise all the way up. And the other thing that I just want to end with this little spiel, and then we'll get going to the fun part, is that Lawrence Wright is telling us that we're about to embark in a cultural revolution, because the Black plagues during the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, evolved into the Renaissance, where we had so many amazing figures like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo that revolutionized art and thought and medicine and science and literature to where it is today. So hopefully, now that we're still quarantined and we get through the election, we live a happy ending, we will embark on the best cultural renaissance we've ever experienced before. So That's my Zeitguiding for the day. Let's move on to my favorite section, which is the hearts and minds section. As I said, we have both Princess Lockerooo, Samara Cohen, and Michael Garner. We're going to start with Samara. How are you, Samara? Are you there?
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Hey, Samantha, I do want to show a video to show people who Princess Lockerooo is. It's a short video, so before you have us share the screen, I'd love to show this if that's possible, okay?
Absolutely.
All right. You're so amazing, by the way. Everybody should hire Samantha. You wouldn't think that you need a Zoom producer. She's amazing. Samantha, put your info in the chat. How's that? So like I said, Princess Lockerooo was just in the New York Times literally last week. And if you remember, it's the song from the beginning. It was one of the first whacking anthems. So remember? And she's not the only one, but she's causing all those to actually get to this point. And I'm just going to give you, because Zoom still sucks in terms of performativity, and we can't have Princess Lockerooo perform for us because it sucks, but I could show this. Zoom, get it together. So your stock could go up even more. All right. Here we go.
Princess Lockerooo, entertainer, producer, activist, educator, and queen of whacking, bears the Soul Train legacy at the forefront of the whacking revolution.
Whacking is a dance that restores mental and physical health. Whacking replaces the thought of I am not enough with I can do and be anything. Whacking is sensual without objectification. Whacking is powerful, but not intimidating. Whacking bridges the gap between cultures. Whacking builds communities. Whacking changes lives. In the past, Black people were depicted on television as gangsters, drug dealers, pimps, and prostitutes. With Soul Train's arrival, Black people were shown with integrity. The culture of Soul Train enabled them to feel proud, loved, and respected while celebrating their artistry. Soul Train was a platform for up-and-coming Black artists to be seen on a national level. Whacking was born in the gay clubs of LA in the 1970s. It flourished on Soul Train and lives on in the hearts and lives of thousands of people across the globe. Within the global whacking community, interactions are not objectified sexually or fueled by substance abuse. They are driven by the connection to ourselves and each other through love, unity, music, and dance.
All right. You know what, Samara? That's such a great video. All right, Sam, I'm totally cool to just have me and Samara on the screen, or Princess Lockerooo. By the way, it's Princess Lockerooo with 3 O's.
That's right, because I'm a triple threat.
Oh, explain.
Yes. Well, I mean, I have a background in musical theater, and so, you know, I sing, dance, act, but whacking is my life.
All right, so you kind of told us about whacking. What is it really? And obviously it's a dance form.
Right.
What does it represent?
Well,
How did it get started?
well, whacking was born out of the gay clubs. It was originated by gay Black men, and it was born out of the oppression faced by gay Black men at the time. You know, and it was really just a dance and an expression of who you really are inside. It was a platform to be yourself without judgment.
And so this was this happening before Soul Train, the show?
Well, I believe Soul Train started in '71. Whacking started around the same time in the gay clubs of LA. And my teacher—
All Black? All black gay men?
Black and Hispanic,
Okay.
and the
Uh-huh.
DJ was actually Italian and Japanese. Michelangelo was the DJ
Oh,
who
wow.
played the
You're the
music,
Renaissance.
right? Who played the music that made whacking what it is, and the music plays a big role in whacking. We can talk about that as well. But it was born in gay clubs. Tyrone Proctor, who was my teacher, who you got to meet, who passed away
I
sadly
know.
a
I
few
did
months
get to meet
ago.
him at your house.
Yeah, yeah.
So
He
sad. He was like the
unfortunately,
original teacher who taught you, right?
yes, he was the one who really, I guess, he was the biggest catalyst of the resurgence. Because he brought back the history. We started learning the dance at the Broadway Dance Center in the early 2000s with Brian Footwork Green, who was a brilliant dancer, choreographer, and Tyrone came along and he shared the history. He explained to us why this dance is what it is and gave it meaning. And he really empowered us to be ourselves and helped bring out the individuality in each of us. So I owe my entire life to him. And he was the one who really brought whacking to Soul Train.
Wow. Okay. So it started in Soul Train. Like I said, there's theories that, there's theories about it being eliminated by culture. Not eliminated, but
it died out. The dance,
yeah.
it was very, it reached a certain level of popularity, but it never really became as popular as locking, which was another dance of the time, which was done to, the group, the Lockers. They would come on and they would have the stripes and the hats, and that dance style really, really took off in the 70s. Whacking didn't get that kind of spotlight, and
What did?
what did?
Yeah.
Locking and popping. Locking and popping were two funk dance styles that were done to funk music. Locking was done to funk music like James Brown. Popping is done to funk music kind of like Zapp and Roger, with like a little bit harder hit, and there was a group called the Electric Boogaloo's for popping, and there was a group called the Lockers.
Who played the song that I played in the beginning? You said that was like the whacking anthem.
So whacking music is actually, it's European disco. I mean, even Donna Summers, she recorded a lot of her music in Germany. A lot of the classic whacking music is imported from Europe. And the music is so important because when you listen to classic disco, you will notice that there are so many instruments, and it's also live. This is before there was, drum machines. It was all analog. And it was orchestral. It was orchestral. There was an orchestra in a disco band isn't just like a 5-piece band. It's a full-on orchestra with strings,
amazing,
horns, and timpani. So all those different dynamics in the music gives the dancers so much to play with when they're accenting the sounds in the music. And that's really what whacking is. When you whack, you make people see the music.
See the music. Okay. So a lot of people, like Legendary is the big show on HBO Max, and not everybody, but a lot of people know about Pose, which was basically the fictionalized version of Paris is Burning, which was ballroom culture in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
So this was before posing, voguing, like remember the Madonna song Vogue? Like
of course. So, a lot of people confuse whacking and voguing, and to an untrained eye, they might look very similar because they both have a lot of arm movement. And they did both stem from gay Black culture. However, they birthed in completely different eras. Whacking was the 70s in California. Voguing was the 80s in New York. Whacking was inspired by movie stars like Greta Garbo and Marilyn Monroe, Marlene Dietrich, the Hollywood actresses, and it was inspired by disco music, which again is that live orchestral music with all those sounds, and the vocals are very important. Voguing was originated to electronic music when house music first started becoming created, and there was disco samples in some of the early Vogue music. But a ball is a competition. It's always been a battle, and the houses are like these families, or as described in Paris is Burning, they were like gangs, and they would come to the ball, and that's how they would battle it out with each other. Whacking was never like that. There were dance contests in the 70s, but it wasn't like a dance battle with a specific style. And those dance contests would sometimes happen in the clubs, but in the underground gay clubs, whacking was really more about just loving yourself. It wasn't like sure, of course there was attitude,
Let me ask you a question. If you watch Pose, you see that there is a large, or there was, and I still think, well, obviously Legendary, there are balls now, or maybe it was a resurgence, a lot of transgender individuals
Sure.
who were part of it. Were there
Sure.
transgender whackers, or was it mainly just
I've never
black men?
heard of any transgender whackers in the 70s being originators. The originators that I have heard from my teacher, and they were all gay men, gay Black and Hispanic men, but I never heard of anybody being transgender. But I'm sure that there were trans people in the community. There were drag queens for sure. I mean, drag is another thing that really inspired whacking. Whacking is almost like doing a drag performance, but without lip syncing. You have to perform and you have to tell the story.
And that's
And
what
they
you
would
did.
see, right, and they would
All
see
right,
the drag
so
queens before the club opened up, and then they would dance and imitate what they saw dancing.
okay, so I got two questions, and then we have to move on to Michael. Number
Sure.
one, why whacking for you?
Well,
I mean, you're very talented. Out of
Thank
all
you.
the dance movements, why whacking?
Right. I think it was my calling. Before I started dancing, I reached a low point. I was depressed. I didn't have confidence, and whacking really, really helped that. When I created Princess Lockerooo, this character, it's like my alter ego. It's like my superhero. And whenever I step into Princess Lockerooo, I'm a whole other person. I become this diva. I'm fearless and nothing can stop me. And I think that because whacking is about being yourself and not about just looking like everybody else, it gave me the opportunity to embrace my uniqueness and really accept who I am. So it's a journey of self-discovery and seeing how I can affect people's lives. Speaking about culture, I mean, I've traveled to 26 countries around the world teaching whacking, China being one of the places that I go to the most often. And I've been to so many different cities in China, all over Asia, and whacking is becoming very popular in countries where women are not really encouraged to be outgoing and be divas, and I really feel like it's creating cultural change around the world, also within the gay community, because whacking is now done underneath the hip hop umbrella at hip hop dance battles around the world, whereas they used to be straight male dominated. Now you see gay people at these events, and you see women coming out dressed as women, being themselves, not trying to masculinize themselves, to get street cred.
So is that why you would say, like, why now is there huge? I mean, it was huge. I mean, a lot of people don't get newspapers now. It was like, what, a spread on you and whacking. Why?
Yeah.
Why is whacking so relevant right now?
Well, I think because it's more than just a dance. Number one, its unique history is so meaningful. And the fact that it's transforming people's lives. The way that I describe it is when you physically embody, in order to do the dance, you have to be a diva. You have to embody confidence. So when you embody that confidence, and the physical repetition of that will allow that feeling to live inside your body and become your reality. So it really is helping people on a spiritual level, on an emotional level. And I think that that's what we need right now. Just like you said, there's a renaissance is on the rise. And I think whacking is going to be a big part of that.
All right, we got to end with the last zeitgeisty subject. And then, Michael, you just came on, right? Are you there, Michael? Okay, good. Michael came on a little late, so it's good that I'm running late. So TikTok, right?
Yeah.
In very short soundbite, why don't you tell everybody your perspective, what TikTok is, and how does it coincide with the whacking phenomenon?
TikTok is inspiring people to be creative using whatever it is that they have around them. Can't leave the house. You can order stuff on Amazon, but you can't have this social experience that you normally would. With TikTok, you can. And
Great answer, by the way. I know I probably put you on the spot now that I think about it. Sorry about that. But it's social media, and it's problematic right now because our president said that because a Chinese company owns it. I read something today that 90% of TikTok users would drop off if it was banned here in the United States. So we got to do everything in our power to preserve it, because clearly it's a great art form. I talked about how Gen Zs are gaming the system, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. So last thing I got to tell everybody is that you're here to teach everybody. I knew we wanted to, well, if we have time in the end, we'll talk about what we said, because we got to start, talking to Michael. But you give lessons, people can follow you, we can learn about whacking. I think, like you said, a cultural renaissance, mental health is on the rise. We need more positivity in our lives. And you created an art, you didn't create it, but you preserved and are proselytizing an art form that could really help us be happy and confident with ourselves. So thank you, first of all. Why don't you put your information in the chat, and then we'll get into learning about safe transportation and other things with Michael Garner.
How's it going? How are you?
I'm good. How are you? So you were running late. What happened?
Yeah, I was on a congressional panel discussion about diversity that was sponsored by the Black Caucus in Washington, D.C. And there were about 400 minority and women-owned firms on the call, this panel discussion. It was a Zoom call. And so I'm sorry I'm late. It started at 3:00. And so
do you have time to go a little over? Is that okay? Do you have time?
Definitely.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you didn't see Princess Lockerooo perform, but I don't know, you were telling me before that you knew about Soul Train intimately, right?
Of course. I mean, every Black person in America know about Soul Train. So Soul Train actually started in Chicago, probably the late 1960s, by Don Cornelius, who was a journalist. He basically got a sponsor. The sponsor was Sears, and he created a daily show, and it came on a UHF station, Station 17 in Chicago. And so he would highlight the latest dances, the latest artists on every day. And so you would run home from school and turn on Soul Train every day. And so when Berry Gordy...
Unlike broadcast television, right? I mean,
yes.
All that existed then.
Yes. So, I mean, back in those days, you had your standard stations, 2, 4, 7, 9, 11, and then a PBS 13, right? But in Chicago, a new concept came out, UVH or something, where there were new channels coming out. And so it was on Channel 17 in Chicago. And so when Berry Gordy moved Motown from Detroit to Los Angeles, Don moved Soul Train from Chicago to LA to give an outlet to the record companies that wanted to expose new artists and new songs. And so Soul Train became a weekly show on Saturday afternoons. And so starting from Chicago, he followed Berry Gordy out, and the rest is history. He would call it the hippest train ride in America, and he would always end his shows with love, peace, and soul.
Huh. And why do you think it was so successful? Because, the world wasn't, well, we could talk about that in terms of diversity and inclusion, which is our next topic. Why do you think people embraced the Black community so much during the 70s in terms of watching it?
Well, it was coming out of the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power movement. And so corporate America migrated over to being sponsors of Black shows, and they had sponsors. And then, I mean, everybody has always liked Black music dating back to the 1930s and 40s. And right. So when R&B really hit in the 1960s, then basically Soul Train gave a platform to move Black music into Middle America and in the homes of everyone. And so Soul Train was very revolutionary because it was owned by Blacks.
Gotcha.
And so Don owned the trademark. He owned everything. He employed a lot of Black people behind the scenes. There were a lot of Black companies who were advertising their products on Soul Train. And so it was a win-win for the Black community.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, it's crazy where we are today. So we are obviously in pretty devastating times, and thankfully we have people like you. And you're the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer of the MTA, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. I'm really glad you had that up there because I actually didn't know what the acronym meant. And you're working on creating a culture of diversity and inclusion. So I want to start there. And then, of course, I know everybody's so interested on how they should feel about taking the subway or public transportation around the world. Anybody, well, you're not doing it around the world, but everybody is. And I would love to hear the story of how you got to where you are today and how we should feel about using public transportation moving forward. Well, let's start there, actually. So tell us the story of where we are right now with the subway. I hear that it closes at 1 a.m. right now.
Yes.
And what's happening? How should we feel? Those of us who live in Brooklyn and have to get into Manhattan, which we do.
You should feel safe because the MTA, for the first time in history, we're shutting down 24-hour service from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. and we're disinfecting all of the subway cars and the subway stations in itself. And so if you ride the subways now, you will see a big difference. One, the ridership is still down, but we are disinfecting all of our subway trains on a daily basis. And so these trains are clean, they're safe, they've been disinfected, and it is a law to wear your mask. And so if someone is caught without wearing their mask, they can be written up and given a summons for $50 fine for not wearing their mask. And
50,
so,
50, or yeah, okay.
50.
And who's observing that right now? How?
NYPD, and also MTA PD. And so they are trolling the subway systems and the train to make sure that our customers are adhering to social distancing, but also wear their mask. It is mandatory for you to wear your mask if you're riding our buses and our subways. Mandatory. No ifs, ands, and buts.
And what about social distancing? Is everybody 6 feet apart on the train?
Most.
Okay. What's going to happen when, I guess right now, I think it was 10% of people going back to work in New York City in the buildings who were working from home before. There are a lot of people who were not able to work from home. I think like yourself, right? Were you working from home?
Yes, we were mandated to work from home by the governor, and so our first day back was on July 6th. So 30% of the MTA staff is currently back working in their respective offices. The other staff are working remotely.
Okay. So yeah, what about when everything opens up? How are we going to social distance or physically distance on the train?
Well, in stages. And so, a funny thing is that we live in an economy where our economy is not going to thrive if you are at home. It takes you to get back out, to spend your monies so it can drive the economy. And so everyone is at a pause moment right now to try to figure out whether or not it's going to be a spike in the fall in conjunction with flu season. And so everyone is kind of in a pause mode right now. But as soon as there's a vaccine, as soon as it's safe for the public to get back into their respective offices, that's what's going to drive the economy. I mean, we live in a city that the second industry driver is tourism. And so I was reading where last year we experienced 60 million tourists. 60 million tourists.
Wow.
And they spent $50 billion. So tourism is one of the leading drivers of the economy in New York City. And you know that as New York City goes, the nation goes. And so if we're not thriving, if we're not prosperous, if Broadway is shut down, if the taxis are not being employed, if hotels are not open, if restaurants are closed and bars are closed, we are in a pandemic economically.
And do you think that's going to happen, or you have no idea?
I have no idea, but I will say this, that all of the economists are predicting that we have not even experienced the fallout from COVID-19 yet. They are predicting that it's really going to be a fall in the first and second quarters of next year. And so,
Yep.
and so we need to figure out a way of how we can get our economy back on track. How can we can operate under the new normal, whatever the new normal is and whatever the new normal is going to be. But New York City is the kind of city that we have to thrive. We have to get out. We have to engage in a great nightlife. We have to get out to our restaurants and our bars and spend capital in order to drive the economy.
And so if you know this, which we trust you because you're basically a governmental official, by the way, who runs the MTA? Just for those of you those of us who don't really know, like me.
It's ran by a chairman and CEO, Pat Foy, and a board. And the board members are appointed by the governor, the respective county executives in each one of the counties that we service, and the mayor also appoints board members as well. And so the MTA, from a data point perspective, we are a $1 trillion organization with our real estate holdings and our equipment. And we employ 72,000 people. Our service area is 5,000 square miles from Suffolk, Long Island, all the way up to Newburgh, New York. And we safely transport our customers 6.2 million per day pre-COVID to their respective jobs and other places that they are traveling to.
Well, this is a good segue into what your job is, in addition to being part of making sure all the transportation arenas that you're overseeing, which are what? You have the subways, buses.
Well, we have buses, subways, commuter rail, including Long Island Railroad and Metro North, and bridges and tunnels.
And before we go to diversity inclusion, which is what you do in particular this organization, how can all of us who don't live in New York, what can we learn from you and your organization, obviously, and the journey from March to where we are now, and what we have to do to move forward to make sure everybody's safe?
Well, once again, we're the largest transportation network in North America. You need to adhere to our safety protocols. When you ride our system, adhere to social distancing. Make sure that you wear your mask at all times so we can drive this COVID pandemic downward. Mm-hmm. The governor has done a fantastic job. I was getting phone calls from all over the country from family and friends who said that they would rather watch Governor Cuomo give his observation on COVID-19 and how to effectively deal with it than listening to Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, that's not surprising. But and one last question, how do you feel about a lot of the people who have, a lot of the New Yorkers who have left New York City? Has that impacted not only transportation, but what is the conversation there? Or maybe you're not having it about people. Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot of people who are moving out to the rural areas and suburban areas because they did not have a good experience with being locked up in their apartments during the mandatory quarantine and shutdown. But listen, New York is the greatest city in the world, the greatest, most diverse city in the world, where fashion and dance and food and trends are set here. So as New York City goes, the nation goes. And so I don't care if it's the bombing of the World Trade Center in 92, 93, 9/11 in 2001. We will get through this pandemic because New Yorkers are strong.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. And there, we have been doing a great job to contain it. And again, we'll see what happens in the fall. So shifting to the diversity and inclusion conversation, you are the Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer of the MTA, right? And how long have you had that job?
I am the first and only Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the MTA. I was appointed back in 2009.
And it's interesting because, yep, it's interesting because right now it is like, I don't want to say trendy because it should be part of every organization, but you probably had this title before anybody in any corporation, because I didn't hear that title 12 years ago in the companies that I worked in. Is that correct? Or
I was one of the first, not the first, because the private sector had that title prior to me ascertaining that title. So there were a few of us. Now is more globally accepted and used. So most of your major corporations now have a Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, and your government agencies, from the city agencies, state agencies, and state authorities, they have hired diversity and inclusion officers as well.
and what does that mean for what you do and in the context of the MTA?
And that means that my staff and we're currently going through a transformation. So I'm adding staff as we currently speak. So my staff of 90 people are in charge of the EEO and Title VI rules and regulations and laws, making sure that every employee at the MTA has the ability to work in a harassment-free environment. And so I have dedicated investigators. So if you lodge a complaint about race discrimination, gender discrimination, or sexual harassment, I have staff who will investigate it and then make a recommendation on the tenure of the employee who is accused. That segment of my staff, they have the ability to work in conjunction with our HR departments in making sure that we have set strategies in place that allows the MTA to recruit, hire, develop, and promote a diverse workforce. So our workforce should reflect the 12-county region, 5,000-mile region that we service. It should reflect that marketplace. My other staff, they are responsible with the recruitment, engagement, and integration of certified minority and women-owned and disadvantaged business enterprises into our buying and procurement process. And so last year, the MTA made history. We paid in excess of $1.1 billion to minority and women-owned firms in 1 year. And so the reason why that's really important is because when you look at, historically speaking, a lot of your minority and women-owned firms have been simply shut out of the marketplace. And so now having the ability to eradicate barriers to entry and to pay in excess of $1 billion to minority women-owned firms in 1 year, you're giving them the opportunity to become homeowners, to migrate to the middle class, to have better educational opportunities and better healthcare options. And it's part of the American dream. And guess what? It's being done with taxpayers' dollars. And so everyone now has the ability to benefit from taxpayer-driven dollars and not the select few.
And how has this mission evolved from 12 years ago? What was the sequence of events in terms of culturally, in terms of your mission to create what you've created up to this point?
Out of 97 state agencies and public authorities, the MTA was ranked last with dollars paid to minority women-owned firms. So for example, the year before I got here, that metric or that number was $116 million that were paid, which equated to 6% of MWBE inclusion. Last year, previously 2 years ago, because our most recent years, the numbers are still being vetted. But 2 years ago, that $116 million increased to 736 million and 27% MWB inclusion. And so we've made great strides of, once again, the recruitment, development, engagement of certified minority and women-owned business enterprises.
Mm-hmm. And how has the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement impacting the role that you have? Has it changed anything? How is it impacted in terms of what you've been doing and what you want to do and what you will do?
Well, I mean, the death of George Floyd, and I can speak from a personal perspective because I'm part of the Eric Garner family. Eric Garner was my cousin. And essentially, it took the family and I, led by his mother, who is the strongest person I know, 6 years in order to gain justice and having that officer fired and losing his pension. 6 years. And so after the firing of that officer, the mother, Gwen Carr, once again, we just celebrated her birthday in Brooklyn last night. She had the ability to legislatively move a bill in two houses, the state Senate and the state Assembly, the Eric Garner anti-chokehold bill, which was just signed into law by Governor Andrew Cuomo. And so it is unlawful for any law enforcement officer to put anyone in a chokehold because of this law that was just signed into law by the governor. So I can speak from a personal perspective, but I can also speak from what I do in my day career of ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to be included in our processes in order to be engaged in minority women-owned firms. So your question is, how has the movement motivated or created effective change? And it has, because not only are we now focusing on the contracts, we're focusing on our workforce to make sure that qualified, diverse candidates have the opportunity not only to apply, but to obtain careers at the MTA. And once they obtain a career, have the ability to flourish and be promoted like any other group of people. And so the George Floyd issue, we are in an era right now, which I mentioned before, that I akin to 1968. So in 1968, you had the assassination of the Dr. Martin Luther King. You had the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. You had a Vietnam War going on, and you had civil unrest in most of your big major cities in this nation. And now we are mired in a health pandemic. We are mired in a recession for the country. But when the country is in a recession, Black America, Latinx America, Asian America are in a depression. And then we're now mired in not only national civil rights protests and unrest, but international civil rights protests and unrest. And so we need like-minded people are going to come together, because what I see with these protests and marches, I see Black, I see white, I see Asian, I see young, and I see old. That's the true America that I live in. And when you talk about buzzwords like we want our country back or make America great again, those are buzzwords to take us back to where we was when there was wholesale discrimination, there was lynching, there were voter suppression, slavery. This country is nothing more than an experiment. We are an experiment of a collection of states, blue states, red states, purple states, urban, rural, Black, white, Latinx. We went through a civil war where more than 700,000 people lost their lives in this nation. The civil rights movement started when, after slavery, there was a short period of time of prosperity. And then beginning in the early 1900s, when the federal troops were removed from the South, there were years and years and years and years and years of protests in the civil rights movement. And so hopefully, during this time period that we live in right now, like-minded people are going to come together and create a nation that's going to be open for all and not have someone pit one group against the other group.
Yeah, it's pretty profound. And do you have hope that we're going to get out of this culture of disparity?
Well, hey, listen, you know what? Speaking from the Black experience of being here since 1619, Black people in this country have always had hope. And so, yes, I have hope that as we move forward, this country is going to become the country that it should be for every American that's in this country. But we got to work at it, and we got to fight. We got to stamp out discrimination in whatever form it services in this country.
And as the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the MTA, what would your advice be to all the other leaders of every organization here in America?
To drive effective change. I was recently on a talk show on an Israeli news show, and they asked me the same question. Why was I so optimistic that we were finally going to see change in America? And I told them that once we start talking to each other and not at each other, and understand that we all have the same commonalities, we will then recognize and realize that we are one.
Beautiful. Okay, well, thank you for being here. We are going to do everything you say. I'm speaking for myself, but I know this community here is like-minded, and I know you're really busy and you probably have to go back. So I'm grateful that you took the time to do this and be here. And I hope we can stay in touch.
Definitely.
All
Definitely.
Right.
And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and having me on your very dynamic and informative show. And please continue to bring the news and bring the trends to your listenership.
I hope we can continue to do that. And I'll do everything in my power. I love doing what I do. And I know I do things in interesting ways. And my mission in life is to share it and hopefully inspire everybody to reinvent the future to what we want it to be.
Great.
So thanks, Michael.
All right, have a great day.
You too. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sam, I'd love to just say my closing statements to everybody. And I just, first of all, Sam, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Like I just said to Michael, I love what I do. I hope you continue to join me on my other offerings, my premium culture class, which you're all welcome to join. You could go to my website, zeitguy.com. And if you're part of an organization and you think that I could provide inspiration and value, please ask me to come on and help everybody. And thank you. I used to do this weekly. Now that I did 22 of them, I just no longer can do it on a weekly basis, but I will be offering these special ones every so often. So keep looking at your emails every week. I'm always going to tell you what I learned. I'm also spending more time on social media at ZeitGuideBrad on Instagram and Twitter. And I obviously have LinkedIn. So help me create this community of making the world a better place. And we have a lot of work to do in the next few weeks. So hopefully when we next meet, we'll all have much more positivity. So thank you. I love you all. Bye.